Hello, my name is Mark, and I thank you so much for coming by today. In previous discussions, I mentioned that I'd taken over for my friend's high school honors art classes while he was out on medical leave. After several months and 2 terms later, he returned from his recovery, and we were all thrilled to have him back in action and back in the classroom. For me, I returned to my role as a contract illustrator and designer, happy to get back to my career and the flexibility of working in the office and from home. But sitting in my cubicle or at home, working independently with no one around, it was easy to reflect on the wonderful moments teaching some amazing young people and share the incredible electric energy they brought into the class every day. I learned so much from them, but perhaps even more than they learned from me. So today, I wanted to share some of the things that I learned in my adventure as a high school art teacher, which we'll get right into after this coffee break. For many years, I've been under contract with a large medical university working with some brilliant professionals to create illustrations and designs for presentations, articles, web graphics, brochures, posters, and so much more. It all benefits medical studies and research, which, for me, is important that my contributions actually work to help other people. But after 25 years of being out of the classroom, there's nothing that compares to working with young artists and sharing experiences and knowledge, and to lend a glimpse of insight as to what it's like being a professional artist and designer, especially in such an intimate environment as a classroom. The funny thing, though, is coming away from this teaching experience, I think it was me who ended up learning more about myself, my own artwork, and what life is like through the eyes of a high school art student. There were valuable lessons which I'd forgotten and grown beyond that were important and worth revisiting. Let me share some of these lessons with you now, the first one being, number 1, talk less, listen more. Much of the time spent teaching in the classroom is done talking about subjects, assignments, and tools, but it's also about discipline, focus, and objectives. What I learned, however, is that when I stopped talking, my own learning began. What I mean is that I was able to observe students at work. They would reveal details about their art, their process, and themselves. This allowed me better access to what they wanted to learn and what they didn't want to learn, and actually what they really needed to learn. One student who enjoyed working in watercolor expressed her disappointment in the student grade paints we had in the classroom. She told me that she hated the way her work looked and that the paints felt cheap. She was discouraged and voiced her frustration. I was concerned that she might give up on watercolors. So, the next day, I brought in my own set of artist-grade Daniel Smith paints and asked her to give them a try. She just assumed that all watercolors were the same and had no idea there was a difference between student grade and artist grade, so she didn't expect very much. Then, the look of complete surprise and joy in using a truly high-quality art supply washed over her face. Her understanding between student grade and artist grade finally became clear. Other students gathered around to see her work, and suddenly everyone wanted to try them. But it wasn't something I could share with every student, and not every student would appreciate it the way she did. It was a learning moment for both of us, and when I left, I donated some of my paints and my art supplies to the classroom. This idea of listening more and talking less helped me adapt to each student's interests and their expressions without forcing them to work in a way that was unnatural for them. Number 2, take a learning break to learn. In one class, the assignment was a long and complex 2-term project that would last half the school year until the end of the semester. At the outset, students were really excited about the project and they jumped right in. But after a few weeks and months, they began to get bored, and despite my efforts to keep it fresh and vibrant, they were losing interest, they were getting frustrated, and the project was now becoming a daunting chore. Then, I noticed one young man drawing objects he saw around the classroom, much like a still life drawing. I stopped by and asked what he was working on, and he nervously put his drawing away and said he was just taking a break from the main project. It was clear he thought he was going to get in trouble for not working on the project. Instead, I encouraged him to continue with his drawing, enjoying the exploration of what was around the room and the freedom to draw what he saw. The look of surprise, relief, and happiness came over him, and he thanked me, which kind of made me laugh. The next day, I came into class and recommended to all the students that they take a break from the project and try something different and something new. Instead of drawing in pencil, I suggested markers or pen and ink, or going in the hallway to draw. It was as if the entire class exhaled a giant sigh of relief, and suddenly a completely renewed energy and sense of joy filled the room. For me, it was a pivotal moment. I realized that whether a student or a professional artist, everyone needs to step away from tedious, chore-like projects and play a little bit, to indulge in the creative curiosities that help maintain our artistic spirit and keep our perspectives fresh. Number 3, release the ideal of perfection. I watched so many students begin their sketches only to become frustrated, erase the whole thing, and crumple it up and throw it in the recycle bin. Their drawings were not matching up with their expectations of how the drawing should look. It bothered me to see them wasting materials, wasting their time, and wasting their energy trying to find the one thing in art that does not exist: perfection. It's easy to forget what it was like to be a young artist. That what you envision in your head rarely ever comes out on the paper. I mean, it still happens to me even now. Beginning art students always have an idealistic approach to creating art. This is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. They believe that if they apply their belief and their passion, then their artwork will be perfect. That if they work really, really hard on it, it will be exactly as they imagined. But that's not the case. One student became very frustrated as he tried to get his drawing perfect. He worked on it every class period over and over, yet it just wasn't coming out the way he saw it. I finally stepped in and offered some thoughts. I asked him to draw a picture of wind. He drew a quick picture of trees bending and leaves falling all around. I said, "You didn't draw wind, you drew trees and leaves blowing in the wind. Try again." So he drew a bunch of swirling lines on the paper, and I said, "You didn't draw wind, you drew a bunch of swirling lines." Other students gathered around, curious to understand this puzzle. "Try again," I said. He was confused, staring at his paper. The other students began to laugh and offer their ideas. "I don't get it," he said. "You can't just draw wind." I explained that this was an aha moment, that it is impossible to draw something you can't see. Sure, we can draw things that represent or support the idea of wind, but drawing wind itself is impossible. And I explained that it's the same thing with perfection. We can create ideas or elements that support the idea of perfection, but perfection itself cannot be achieved. I advised him that even great artists can only draw as close to perfection as they can without ever actually reaching it. Understanding composition, perspective, anatomy, proportion, color, and value would certainly help, but that perfection itself was, in short, unattainable. He began to understand that all the drawings that he'd done before, the ones he tossed away, weren't actually as bad as he thought. He had been looking for an idealistic version of what he saw in his mind. And once he saw what I was talking about, that he was seeking something that he just couldn't reach, a light sort of went off, and he was now free to explore his own style and flaws and mistakes, and that they were actually okay. Well, his final drawing was much like his earlier efforts, but they were so much more relaxed and confident, and his true style was clear and became a cohesive piece among all his other work. For me, it was something that I found myself reflecting on with my own artwork too. Number 4, saying you get it, but you actually don't. At the beginning of one week, I gave a lecture on lighting, shading, and values using a flashlight and some styrofoam primary-shaped objects. While I gave my demonstration, students were fidgety and kind of lost interest pretty quick. After, I asked them if they understood what I was talking about and if there were any questions. Just about every student said, "No, I got it," and everyone went back to their work. At the end of the week, to their complete shock, I gave them a test on what we had learned earlier in the week. I had reviewed their work during that week, and it was clear that most of the students didn't remember anything about lighting or shading. Of the 30 or 40 students I had, only about 5 actually understood light, shading, and how value worked. And though everyone said they got it, it was very clear most of them didn't. So, I decided to skinny down the demonstration to be less scientific and boring, and we went over the subjects again using the foam pieces and the flashlight. This time, I knew they got it because in the following week, their drawings were greatly improved. For me, it was a valuable reminder that even though I may think I understand something, I may actually not. And that's important because to ask questions and write things down and take notes and repeat what I've heard to make sure I have it clear is the best way to make sure the project I'm working on is fulfilled to the expectations of who I'm creating it for and to myself. And for the record, The test that I gave the students, well, it wasn't graded and it didn't count. It was actually just for fun. Number 5, the danger of distraction. Now, I come from an old school way of thinking, and I have certain expectations from students. However, those expectations went right out the window when I walked in to teach a classroom full of modern teenagers. The biggest challenge for me was their cell phones. Because art is such an open, airy environment of creativity, I didn't anticipate students being so ridiculously distracted. Sure, they might engage in conversation with each other or even stare out the window or whatever. I did that myself when I was young. But the cell phones are such a complete and utter distraction for every single student. Whether checking Instagram or Snapchat, texting with friends in other classes, watching YouTube videos, playing video games, or even just searching for music. I watched students spend more time fiddling with their phones, iPads and tablets, or laptops than spending on any of their artwork. And their artwork most definitely suffered from these distractions. In fact, my own artwork suffers from distractions even at my age. Whether it's household chores, grocery shopping, bills and invoices, email, and yes, even social media. In some classrooms, teachers put a shoe rack on the back of a door for students to put their phones in when they come into the room. But in an art room, students use their phones to find photo references, resources, and even how-to videos. So my challenge? How to let students have their phones, yet keep them from being a total distraction. My solution was to let go of my old school way of thinking and set down some modern expectations. No texting, no social media, no gaming, only approved photo resources, and only approved how-to videos. At first, there was a lot of grumbling and complaining. I even had to take away a few phones in the first week. But once those expectations became habits, everyone began to understand them and abide by them. And what I saw was students engaging in conversations while they worked. Some would wear headphones and still do their work. Overall, they were starting to have more fun being creative and even immersing deeper into their artwork without all the distraction. For me, while I grew up without these kind of distractions, it's the years of discipline that allow me to stay on track. But I have to admit, it's easy to fall off track if I'm not paying attention and get caught up in my own daily distractions as well. Number 6, making the grade. When I was in high school, art classes were usually either pass or fail. But nowadays, it's required to provide a solid, justified evaluation for each student's project, final project, and term grade. In the school I worked at, we evaluated students based on a criteria called the habits of mind, which addresses specific aspects of art creation. It's a brilliant way to grade students, and it was very familiar to me and how I used to grade students in the past. But the habits of mind allow art teachers to track student progress, measure their abilities, and assess their involvement and success in each phase of an art project. Grades were based on these criteria: persistence, experimentation, planning, expression, reflection, craft, observation, maintenance, and their final project. Watch for a future video here in which I discuss these habits of mind in greater detail. In my own career, I found that using this same criteria to assess my own work has been extremely valuable. I continue to apply them to every project I work on to ensure that I'm presenting the best possible finished work for my client. Because while a client doesn't use these habits of mind to assess my work, I feel much more confident knowing that I did. Number 7, the 5 phases of creativity. I've been working as a creative professional more than twice as long as many of the students I was teaching have been alive. I admit I've forgotten what it was like to be a young artist just starting out, to struggle with refining my skills, learning how to use the materials and tools, coming up with fresh ideas, and the lack of confidence with my abilities. Watching these young people experience the same frustrations that I did when I was young brought back a lot of memories for me. Fortunately, recognizing their frustrations, I was able to address them quickly and share some worthwhile knowledge with them, specifically these 5 phases of creativity. Now, I have a whole video devoted just to this topic if you're interested. I'll put a link in the video description below. These students were not aware of the way the creative process moves from start to finish, which was the core of their frustration and what kept them from succeeding. Teaching them that all artists, from amateurs to professionals, must go through 5 specific phases of creative development in order to complete a project. The first is conception, coming up with a good committed idea to work with. The second phase is development, developing the idea through research and dedicated practice and trial. The third phase, execution, bringing the development together into a final piece. The fourth phase, finalization, is creating the final work, getting feedback and reviews, and making changes where needed. And the fifth phase is presentation, that moment when the art is presented as a completed project. This was the only thing I ever told students to take notes on. I even suggested they send their notes to themselves in an email so they could refer back to them later. I think that even though I was aware of these phases of creativity, actually discussing them allowed me to revisit something that, since then, has been a huge benefit to my own work. Number 8, patience is an elusive creature. It's common for students to come into class bursting with excitement and enthusiasm to begin working on their art. However, classes only lasted 77 minutes, and many students thought they could create a masterpiece in one session. Even in the adult courses I used to teach, beginning students would often have just a vague idea of how long a project would actually take. Whether getting lost in or being immersed in their work or simply losing track of time, students tend to rush through projects trying to fit everything in one sitting. Impatience seems to come along with being young, and no one wants to wait for a layer of paint to dry before adding more. Except this can lead to disastrous results for the artwork. Watching a student completely lose control of a piece to the point where it's impossible to recover from was a valuable reminder for me to slow down. I tried to impress this on the students and to see the bigger picture, spreading out projects over the course of a few days or even weeks. But for high school students, patience is an elusive creature and a difficult habit for a teacher to teach. What I came away with was that in my own artwork, again, I need to slow down. I need to see the bigger picture, and I need to enjoy the process without rushing. I tried to teach the students to build a project slowly, to create a plan, and not sit and expect a masterpiece in 77 minutes. Number 9, to see the best in every work of art. It's easy to look at a student's work and see the shortcomings, flaws and mistakes, and lack of experience. It's easy to point out how wrong something looks or make suggestions on how it could have been better. What's more challenging is to be able to isolate the successful parts of a student's artwork that often hide within those glaring mistakes and shortcomings. To look beyond poor drawing execution and see an advance in composition. To find an interesting array of color within a weak paint application. Or just providing a compliment on creating something at all instead of nothing at all. To draw out those wonderful bits of success and share them with a student is the kind of support that can encourage a student to pursue the arts, where offering nothing but critical observations and negative opinions can often encourage them to quit. And for me, I revel in seeing a student progress along their creative path towards success. Lastly, number 10, to love making art. For a lifetime or so it seems, I've created artwork for other people. For clients, charities, and for companies. I'd become somewhat jaded about creating actual art for fun or just for myself beyond simple doodles and quick drawings. My problem has been that there simply isn't enough time in the day to be creative at my job, to come home to personal and family obligations, and then try to find a spark of creativity to eke out a little bit of time to create some kind of liberating, free-spirited artwork just for myself. It took me going back into the classroom to learn that I had put the basics of art behind me, that the fundamentals and principles of art became unimportant in my corporate life. Things like proportion, composition, perspective, and value had become foreign words in my own artwork. But working with young people and digging deep into the archive of my own experience and knowledge, it allowed me to reopen a door that I think I closed long ago. I was able to reconnect with that passionate part of my creative self and share it with these amazing young people to revive my own curiosity in art and revisit the principles and the fundamentals that had become foreign to me. Going back into the classroom forced me to become a student of my own teachings and to learn from modern teenagers some new ways of looking at the process of creating art. Well, it's hard to express how grateful I am to all the students I met along my journey, or how much I was able to grow as an artist from our shared experience. I thank you so much for taking your time today to watch this video, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe so I can bring you more content like this. I hope you'll stay well, and remember, we're all students of life, and there's always something new to learn in every step we take. Thank you so much again, and God bless.